Your father and mother are in critical condition. You need to cut your trip short and come home immediately. I pleaded desperately to Tyler. But Tyler's response was heartless. I'm on a trip with my colleagues. Handle it on your own. You're probably exaggerating anyway, right? I'm busy, so I'm gonna hang up now. Later. Hold on a second. I tried to reach out to Tyler, but he hung up on me. 2 weeks later. When Tyler came home without any remorse, I spoke up. Both their funerals are over. What? Tyler froze with a puzzled look on his face. What do you mean by both their funerals? Are you trying to play some sick joke on me? He asked me frantically. It's not a joke. Didn't I call you 2 weeks ago that your father and mother were critically ill? I answered Tyler's question. But why so suddenly? Tyler was at a loss for words. My name is Jessica Atkins. I'm 56 years old and a full-time homemaker. I used to work in the administrative department of a major company, but I left the job when I got married. I met my husband Tyler during college. When I became a college student, I joined the tennis club. The reason was simply because a friend invited me. I had never played tennis before. I just wanted to have fun and make friends. That was the feeling when I joined with, but reality was different. At that time, Tyler, who was the head of the tennis club, was a strict guy aiming for national tournaments. For Tyler, it didn't matter whether you had experience or not. It was all about skill. Every day, Tyler would relentlessly serve the ball during practice, and if you couldn't return it, he'd berate you. Being a novice, I couldn't even make contact with the ball using my racket. And Tyler would scold me for it. Jessica, are you kidding me? You're just in the way. Go pick up the balls or something, Tyler said, effectively kicking me off the tennis court. I felt so humiliated by Tyler's insults. I was always relegated to just picking up balls, barely ever holding a racket. Out of sheer frustration, I practiced my tennis swings and form even at home. Perhaps my hard work eventually paid off. One day, as usual, Tyler served the ball, but this time, I managed to powerfully return it. Tyler, seemingly having expected me to miss, stared in shock. But in the next moment, he exclaimed, Jessica, that was incredible! With the biggest smile on his face. It was in that instant that I unexpectedly fell head over heels for him. After that, Tyler continued to be strict, and I kept trying to keep up with his intense training regimen. And then, one day after some time had passed, it was at an evening out drinking with friends. In our group, we have a get-together once a month. The purpose is to deepen our friendships, even outside of our group activities. On the way home from one of those gatherings, I happened to be alone with Tyler. Out of the blue, he confessed his feelings to me. I've fallen for you, Jessica. I want us to be together. I was taken aback. Tyler had never shown any signs of affection towards me. But I had feelings for him too. So, I replied, I like you too. Let's give it a shot. That marked the beginning of our relationship. Tyler wanted to keep our relationship a secret from the club members, so as not to affect the team morale. Still, I was so in love with Tyler back then, I was just happy to be with him. We continued dating even after we both graduated from college, and we got married when I was 26. At Tyler's request, I left my job upon our marriage. I'll always be by Tyler's side from now on. Back then, I was head over heels, daydreaming about a dazzling future with Tyler. 30 years have passed since Tyler and I got married. In the early days, we went on frequent dates and were very close. But, after 30 years, things had become somewhat routine. Even I stopped caring as much about my appearance as I used to. Back in my 20s, I used to wear trendy clothes and was pretty fashionable. Every time I went on a date with Tyler, I remember putting on a full face of makeup. But look at me now. As long as I'm dressed, I don't much care about coordinating outfits. I've grown to love loose skirts with stretchy elastic waists more than those with zippers. Now that I'm a stay-at-home wife, I rarely see other people, so I go barefaced from morning till night. I can't even recall the last time I wore makeup. Some might think I've let myself go. Comparing to my 20s, my body has changed quite a bit. I was fairly slim back then, but not anymore. I've put on weight and now resemble the before pictures you see on weight loss shows. Maybe this change in appearance is one of the reasons our relationship has become routine. Gradually, I feel like Tyler's view of me has shifted from wife to mom. Even though I'm not his mother, he occasionally jokes. "Mom, can I have another coffee?" By the way, my mother-in-law is still around and lives in an apartment about a 10-minute walk from our house with my father-in-law. So, we live close by but separately. My in-laws are wonderful people and always show concern for me. Because they are so caring, I wanted to be there for them, so I visited them often. But lately, my in-laws' health has been declining. My father-in-law has been battling a serious illness, and the doctors say there's not much more they can do. Tearfully, my father-in-law told my mother-in-law and me, "I want to spend my last days at home." So, he was discharged from the hospital and is now receiving palliative care at home. Looking after my father-in-law on her own, my mother-in-law seems exhausted and her expression has darkened. Being a stay-at-home wife, I help with my father-in-law's care almost every day, but living with him must be tough for my mother-in-law. "It's hard, Jessica. Just for one night, could you stay with us?" she asks with a vulnerable expression. "I'm sorry. Tyler comes home at night." It hurt, but I had to turn my mother-in-law down. "I see." Upon hearing my refusal, my mother-in-law murmured with a look of despair. "Every night, I have to take care of Tyler. Tyler is quite the dominant husband and doesn't lift a finger to help around the house. He just throws his dirty socks anywhere. Of course, dinner has to be ready and warm by the time Tyler gets home. Leftovers are absolutely out of the question. If he finds out, there's no telling how much he'll lash out. Once, I couldn't get home in time for Tyler's return because I was taking care of my father-in-law. The moment I got home, Tyler, with a face as red as a beet, yelled at me. "You should prioritize me over my dad. I'm your family, remember?" I wanted to point out that my father-in-law is also his family, but I kept quiet. Because if I had argued, Tyler would have just shouted even louder. Because of things like this, I always have to prioritize Tyler. Every day feels so constricted. Being a stay-at-home wife, I feel guilty and can't stand up to Tyler. I couldn't help my downcast mother-in-law, and could only look at her with concern. Lately, Tyler's been coming home late a lot. And Tyler never lets me know. Sometimes he even comes home on the last train. Today too, Tyler got home past midnight. "I'm back!" Tyler greeted me cheerfully. His face was red, and he seemed a bit tipsy. "Did you go out drinking again? You've been coming home late a lot lately," I said, holding the bag Tyler handed me. "It's my money, and I'll spend it however I want. You're just a stay-at-home wife, so you should just obey me," Tyler retorted gruffly. "But don't you think it's too frequent? Who are you going out with every time? Their families might be worried too," I hesitantly asked Tyler. Maybe Tyler's been forcing people to go drinking with him. Tyler's been with the company for a long time and holds a position of authority. It's hard for most to say no to someone like that. Tyler then replied with a smug smile. "It's all good. I just always drink with the same coworker. Plus, the guy lives alone and is single. He's always happy when I buy him a drink," Tyler said, smugly. I couldn't say anything back, being a stay-at-home wife without much say in matters. Then, I had an idea and decided to talk to Tyler about it. "Could you let me know in advance when you're gonna go out for drinks? Your mom seems really stressed out. And your dad's condition isn't great either. I'd like to be there for them as much as possible." But Tyler laughed off my concerns. "No can do. When I go out depends on my mood. Besides, Mom will handle Dad's situation. Jessica, you should be all in for me." As I was taken aback by Tyler's harsh words, he said. Instead of standing there, get the bath ready. You're so slow. With that, he quickly headed to the bathroom. Yes, I'm sorry. All I could do was respond like that. Then, one day, Tyler suddenly told me, I'm gonna go on a trip for 2 weeks from next week. While I stood there in shock, Tyler cheerfully flipped through a guidebook, pondering what he'd eat. And he was planning to go to Australia. Regaining my composure, I asked Tyler, why the sudden international trip? What about your job? And I don't even have a passport? Tyler seemed a bit annoyed with my questions. I got a bonus, so I thought I'd just go for it. I've already requested PTO from work. And I'm not going with you, Jessica, so you don't need a passport, right? Tyler answered nonchalantly. I haven't even had a proper honeymoon since we got married. Who are you going with? I asked Tyler. Even for day trips, Tyler would say it's a waste of money and never took me along. Now this sudden international trip? It seemed suspicious. I stared intently at Tyler. Tyler retorted, I'm going with a guy from work. Now, get dinner ready already. I realized it would be challenging to press him further. Tyler probably wouldn't answer me if I continued to ask, and might even snap at me. Though I felt frustrated, I reluctantly started preparing dinner. And that day, Tyler left for his trip early in the morning. But by noon, I found myself frantically calling Tyler. What do you want? I'm about to board a plane for an international trip. Read the room. Tyler snapped at me as soon as he answered. My in-laws are in critical condition. Please cancel your trip and come home immediately. I pleaded with Tyler desperately. If he hadn't boarded the plane yet, there was still time. At least, that's what I thought. But Tyler's response was cold. I'm on vacation with my colleague. Handle it yourself. You're probably exaggerating anyway. I'm busy, gonna hang up now. Bye. Wait a second. I tried to reach out to Tyler, but he hung up anyway. No matter how many times I called back, he didn't answer. You'll regret this, I whispered to myself. 2 weeks later. I'm back. Tyler walked in cheerfully, carrying a large suitcase. I approached the unapologetic Tyler and said, both their funerals are over. What? Tyler looked puzzled, as if he didn't understand what I was saying. What do you mean by both their funerals? Are you playing some kind of sick joke? Tyler, clearly panicking, questioned me. I sighed deeply at Tyler's flustered demeanor. It's no joke. Don't you remember I called you 2 weeks ago telling you your parents were critically ill? I replied to Tyler's question. But, why all of a sudden? Tyler trailed off, unable to find the words. And I found myself sitting on the floor. When I went to visit your parents, they both had collapsed with pale faces. I called an ambulance in a panic, but the doctor said they were both in critical condition. Your dad needed care for a while now, and your mom had been looking unwell recently. Just a series of unfortunate events, I guess. I explained to Tyler, with a detached tone, about the events leading up to my in-laws' critical condition. I'm truly heartbroken that my in-laws ended up like this. I was visiting my in-laws' house almost every day and still couldn't save them in time. To this day, I regret not going to their place sooner. But right now, I'm just so angry at Tyler. My in-laws are his real parents. Yet, Tyler chose himself over them until the very end. No matter how much I pleaded, Tyler always prioritized himself. Remembering the tired look on my mother-in-law's face just makes me even angrier at Tyler. Tyler, with a grimaced face, remained silent. He probably can't come to terms with reality. I decided to press Tyler further. It's your fault, isn't it? Choosing a trip with your colleague over your own parents. Did you enjoy your vacation? I asked Tyler with a sly smile. But Tyler just stayed silent. So, I decided to prod a bit more. Well, I guess a trip with your lover is fun, right? 2 weeks seems a bit long though. When I said that, Tyler, as if resigning himself, began to talk. You knew? Yeah, I've been seeing Baker from work. She's over a decade younger than you, and she comforts me. It seems Tyler was indeed cheating. His recent late nights were probably because of his affair with this Baker. As I stayed silent, Tyler, thinking I had accepted his confession, began to talk more. Baker is nothing like you. She has a slim figure, is beautiful, and she has a job. You're nothing compared to her. Tyler was clearly proud of himself. Huh. Not caring at all, I responded nonchalantly. He seemed to forget he had asked me to become a stay-at-home wife after we got married. Then, as if he had an idea, Tyler made a suggestion. That's right. Now that my parents are gone and there's no one to oppose a divorce with you, and I can live here with Baker. So leave right now. I was flabbergasted by Tyler's words. Up to now, I'd been a stay-at-home wife, always deferring to whatever Tyler said. I had no regular income of my own, and part of me lacked the confidence to move out and support myself. But after seeing Tyler prioritize a trip with his mistress over his critically ill parents, I didn't want to be with him anymore. Fine, I'll leave right now. Goodbye. And with that, I packed a minimal amount of stuff and left the house. A week after I started staying at a budget motel, my husband Tyler called my cell. Hello? As soon as I picked up, Tyler jumped in. I can't find the checkbook at home. He sounded pretty panicked. However, I left all the statements under Tyler's name at the house. Of course, that includes the bank book where Tyler's salary gets deposited. The only checkbook I took is in my name. Did you check properly? As soon as I said that, Tyler shouted. It's the checkbook in your name. That account had a pretty good amount of money, right? It's a joint property, so half of it's mine, isn't it? After recklessly spending on trips and whatnot, I couldn't believe Tyler was now bringing up joint property. Holding back a heavy sigh, I calmly responded. The money in that checkbook is from gifts I received from my family and savings from when I was single. So it doesn't count as joint property, you know? Tyler, sounding frantic, replied. That's a problem. I nearly spent all of my last month's salary and bonus on the overseas trip. I thought I could cover the shortfall in our living expenses by withdrawing from your account. Up until now, I'd kept my checkbook in a drawer where Tyler could easily see it. I had no intention of hiding it from Tyler. So Tyler must have sneaked a peek at the balance. I've moved out, Tyler, so I have no idea about your living expenses. Maybe ask for an advance on your paycheck? I firmly declined Tyler's request. Then, I added, just to give Tyler a heads up. By the way, you might want to assume that there's hardly any inheritance from your parents. They were living on their pensions, and with the cost of your father's care, they were barely getting by. And you better clear out their rented apartment soon, or you'll be paying rent every month. My in-laws had been living in a rented apartment, barely making ends meet with the rent and the cost of caring for my father-in-law. My mother-in-law somehow managed to save and get by each month. I reckon my mother-in-law had her share of worries and stress. You're kidding. Tyler sounded shocked over the phone. So, I decided to give Tyler the final blow. I have no responsibilities to help you out. You are on your own, I declared cheerfully. Why? Tyler's voice was full of disbelief. Tyler is already struggling with money, and he's probably panicking. Moreover, he's lost my in-laws and has no one else to turn to. I've already lost my real parents. How can you be so heartless? Are you some kind of monster? Tyler cried out, venting his frustrations at me. Despite having kicked me out with no income, he seemed to have forgotten that. I have no sympathy for Tyler, who's lost so much. It's all Tyler's fault. So, I laughed and replied. Well, duh. You cheated. Don't expect me to help you out after what you have done. Hearing the word cheated, Tyler flinched. I don't want to ask the company for the help. If the company finds out about Baker and me, it'll be a disaster. Tyler's voice was shaky. But it was not my concern. I don't even know the face of Baker. It's you and Baker who did wrong in the first place, right? I challenged Tyler. I hope they both lose their social credibility. I've got nothing left to lose. Whatever happens to them, it's none of my business. It's all my fault. Just help me out this time, please. Tyler pleaded with a voice full of desperation. No way. You're gonna regret this big time. I told him that and ended the call with Tyler. Tyler and I eventually got divorced. At first, Tyler was reluctant to agree to the divorce, mainly because of the financial issue. But in the end, he was persuaded by the lawyer I hired and signed the divorce papers. Tyler always acted arrogant in front of me and my in-laws but was very submissive in front of others. He's the kind who's all bark and no bite. That's probably why Tyler couldn't stand up to a professional like the lawyer and ended up being told what to do. Our properties will be split equitably. All thanks to my lawyer. Tyler had almost exhausted his savings on a trip abroad with Baker. So, he was tight on cash. My lawyer guessed that Tyler will be very uncooperative. But in the end, I was pleased with the situation. Now, about what happened afterward. It seems Tyler is living paycheck to paycheck, having difficulty to support himself. On top of that, he had additional expenses like cleaning out and paying rent for the rental apartment of my in-laws. And apparently, he got dumped by Baker. Initially, Baker was very ambitious and got close to Tyler for her own career advancement. But affair was exposed right after we got divorced. Tyler got demoted, and it seems Baker got transferred to a remote branch. If Director Adkins is getting demoted, I don't need him anymore. Thanks for everything. That's what was said, and Tyler got dumped. Though Tyler got demoted, he didn't get transferred within the company. So, he seems to be feeling out of place and uncomfortable. Now, being dumped by Baker and all alone, Tyler has contacted me through my lawyer. I messed up. I broke up with Baker, so I want another shot with you. That's what I heard through the attorney. Since I've already blocked Tyler's calls, it seems like his only option is to relay messages through the lawyer. Knowing Tyler's usually timid nature, the fact that he's pleading with the lawyer like this tells me he's really backed into a corner. On top of that, he's been saying things like, I'm seriously out of money right now. Can you lend me some from your savings back when you were single? Please! Making demands that don't benefit me in the slightest. Even the attorney seemed taken aback by this and relayed it to me with a chuckle. I guess Tyler's gonna have a tough life from here on out. Frankly, I hope he continues to struggle and squirm. By the way, I got in touch with Baker through the lawyer, and she responded in a very respectful way. I was told, through the lawyer, that she said, when I was with Mr. Tyler, my expenses were quite low, so I had fun with his money. But it did not last long. Please tell her I deeply regret everything. It seems she was never really interested in Tyler, just his position. Tyler was head over heels for Baker, and to see him ruin his life over it, it's quite pitiful. Thinking of Tyler's misfortune made me smirk. Since then, I've decided to get back to work. Would you believe it, I took a part-time job at a convenience store. It's my first time in customer service, but it's surprisingly fun. I was initially worried about being on my feet all day. But once I started, time just flies, and it's a blast. Beyond working the register, there's ordering products, frying snacks, and a lot more to convenience store work. I even get to use my housekeeping skills with the cleaning tasks. I've heard from the manager that if I work hard, I could become a permanent employee. Apparently, there's been others like me who made the transition. Being in my 50s is like being at the halfway point in life. Being divorced, I initially thought my future was bleak. But even at this age, I'm discovering new things and having a ball. I want to keep looking forward and keep on moving. That's how I feel right now. I'm gonna take your baby and leave it in the mountains. I'm nursing my son right here, okay? Upon hearing my words, a sound of a smartphone dropping came from the other end of the phone line. It was Lisa, my sister-in-law. She must have checked the back seat, for a scream followed shortly after. Come to think of it, Lisa had always been tormenting me. Indeed, there were the scenes at the wedding reception, the constant spam emails, and the sudden visit right before I gave birth. But that scream marked the beginning of Lisa's end. My name is Michelle Anderson. I'm 27 and just recently gave birth and returned from the hospital. My husband, Michael, is completely smitten with our newborn son, Alex, and he reluctantly went to work today. I get along well with my in-laws, and you could say we're living a happy married life. Except for Lisa, of course. From the very beginning, Lisa and I didn't gel well. Michael and I were classmates in middle school. Our school in a small town in Nebraska was peaceful with fewer students and an atmosphere where bullying was unheard of. Michael's family runs a decent-sized construction company in the area. Mostly working within the state, but occasionally getting orders from outside. It's well regarded. Their house was large, and our group of friends would often hang out or study there. Michael's mom was always welcoming. They had a part-time helper who kept the house tidy, and during her breaks, she'd serve us snacks and drinks. One summer day, while working on homework, we heard unfamiliar, heavy footsteps. Wondering who it could be, we were soon hit with an overpowering scent of perfume. "Mikey, I'm back!" A flamboyant, large woman called his name and literally jumped on him. He pushed her away, exclaiming, "Sis, we're studying here, okay? Oh, come on, Mikey. It's not nice to treat your sister like that after such a long time." She pouted. "I told you, we're studying. We have exams coming up." Yeah, whatever." She then scanned our group, pausing to look at each one of us. While she was doing that, he went to call his mom. She seemed to be sizing each of us up. When her gaze met mine, she frowned deeply. Ew, why is she here? No one really understood what she meant. She gestured towards some of the others and said, "You're okay, and so are you. But you." She pointed at me. "Don't get close to my Mikey. You seem so dull and gloomy." I was stunned, never having been spoken to like that before. My friends quickly jumped to my defense, saying things like, "She always helps us with homework." Or, "She's really smart. What's that got to do with anything? Being around her might make Mikey gloomy too." She waved her hands dismissively at me. She was wearing a dress with too many frills and ribbons for a summer day. And she was quite imposing, especially compared to us middle schoolers. "I'm leaving." I didn't listen to my friends' pleas to stay and hurriedly left, hearing Lisa's amused laughter behind me. That day, I got an apology call from Michael. "I'm sorry for what Lisa did. She's always been like that, ever since we were kids." "Oh, really? I don't know why she said those things to you." "It's okay. It's not your fault, Michael." But since that incident, every time someone mentioned going to his house, I hesitated. Time flew, we graduated, and went to different high schools. Our group drifted apart, and I lost touch with Michael. I bumped into him again when I moved to New York for college. After the orientation, as I was wandering through clubs trying to decide which to join, someone suddenly grabbed my arm. "Is that you, Michelle?" "Michael? Is that you?" It seemed too good to be true, but Michael was attending the same college and was in the same department as me. We had different majors, but we ended up taking many of the same classes. We started hanging out a lot. Those 4 years deepened our bond. Then came job hunting. Neither of us ended up going back to our hometowns. Michael was expected to take over his family's business, so I was surprised when I heard he wasn't returning. Then he told me, "You know, I never told you this, but I ran away from Lisa." I was shocked to hear this from him, who was looking so serious. "What do you mean?" "When I started high school, Lisa got a job at a local company through my dad's connections. She had always wanted to stay in New York and have fun, but she couldn't find a job anywhere else." Remembering the loud and overpowering presence of Lisa, I thought, "So that's what happened." That's why I wanted to find a job and get married here. Is that okay with you? What do you mean by okay? You're the only one I want to be with. I couldn't help but hug Michael tightly. 3 years later, he proposed, and we decided to get married. When we went to his family home to introduce ourselves, Lisa was waiting for us. She looked at me and said, "What are you doing here? You're that girl from back then? I thought I'd never see you again after I threatened you that day." I remember being oddly calm and surprised she remembered that after 10 years. Then, at our wedding, Lisa caused a scene. "Why can't I wear the dress I like?" She had arrived in a huge, fluffy white dress. That made her look like a snowman. She arrived at the last moment. So we knew she did it on purpose. There was no time to change her outfit, and she wouldn't have fit into a backup dress anyway. She had always been on the larger side, and she seemed even bigger now. Then, at the reception, she really made a scene. After drinking way too much, she stumbled up during Michael's boss's speech, saying, "You don't have to hide that thin hair of yours," and laughingly took off his wig. I'll never forget the look on Michael's face. Everyone knows not to mention things like that, especially in public. Michael immediately ran over and apologized profusely. Our in-laws quickly grabbed Lisa from both sides and took her out. After the reception, we demanded an apology from Lisa. But she just sat there, crossed her legs, turned her head away, and said, "I will never accept your marriage. Why on earth is Michael with someone like you? Enough is enough, Lisa. You always mess with my friends and partners. Do you know why I left our hometown? It was because of you. Mikey." Lisa turned to look at Michael for the first time. "Ew, why the scary look? Oh right, it must be because of her. Of course. Ew, she's just the type to sit in the corner of the classroom and quietly read books. She must have been talking behind my back to Mikey. I'm sure of it. It was my decision not to introduce you to Michelle for so long. Everything falls apart when you're around. The reason I didn't make the varsity baseball team in high school was my own lack of skill. Yet you still went to confront the coach, and after that, I couldn't stay in the team. You remember that, don't you? But that's not true. It's awful that the coach doesn't recognize Mikey's talents. You are meant to shine. I've always supported you that way." My father-in-law sighed as he looked at Lisa, who was shouting hysterically. However, after a while, he got up, grabbed her hand, and said, "Lisa, get ready quickly. We're giving up the room you're living in now." "What are you talking about?" "Just now, there was a call from your company. That person has been an important contact of yours, having been associated with your company's deputy director for a long time." "What?" Lisa's astonished voice echoed throughout the room. "So, you were rude to him. You know what that means, right?" He was quite angry, but he said he'll continue doing business with the company in exchange for firing you. I let you live on your own because you said you're working, but that's over. We won't let you out of the house so easily. And we're gonna put you to work hard here." My father-in-law's stern voice was a relief to Michelle and Michael. "You too, live your life without any worries. Don't worry about the company. Even if you're going to take over, it's still a long way off." Their parents' words were reassuring. However, that was not the end of it. Every day, my phone received harassing calls and a barrage of emails. When I checked her messages during my break at work, I saw a list of comments like, "Because of you, Mikey doesn't come back to his hometown. Mikey is mine. He should always be at home with me. You're not fit to be Mikey's wife. Persuade Mikey to come back." I was seriously considering blocking her number. But then I was overwhelmed by the fear that she might just show up at my door if I did. Around that time, I often felt sick. So, I just let the calls go to voicemail and ignored the texts. Then, I found out I was pregnant. With the persistent nausea, it made sense. When I informed both my parents and Michael's parents, both families immediately congratulated us. So, where's Lisa? She's out right now. Don't worry, I plan on keeping it from her as long as possible. Over the phone, I could hear the weariness in Michael's mother's voice. Thank you. How is Lisa doing there? Well, she's still not back. Every day after work, she's out somewhere in her car. How's the work at your husband's company? Michael's mother sighed deeply. It's a mess. Lisa doesn't even try to learn the basics of her job, and it seems she can't. I was shocked to hear that. And lately, she keeps saying this, that she was deeply hurt by what was said back then. She became depressed and doesn't want to go to work. Even when I tell her to see a doctor and get a note, she says she's too depressed to move. Although I send her off, I've heard she often skips work without notice. But she drives around a lot, right? Yes. She's unpredictable, but I'll make sure she doesn't come bothering you during your crucial time. Thanks to Michael's mother, I didn't face any surprise visits from Lisa while I was home. However, I continued to receive a barrage of emails from her. When are you gonna divorce? You should leave. You're just holding Mikey back. This child looks just like Mikey's first love, completely different from you. Looks like me, actually. The messages were repetitive and draining. I had another issue too. The morning sickness hit me early and hard. Michael was concerned and suggested I take an early leave from work and return to my parents' house. But isn't my parents' place in the same school district as yours? I fear Lisa might show up any day. Michael pondered over this and then called his father. He replied, "All right, since Lisa can't seem to hold a job anyways, I'll force her to join me on a long-term project." Is it far this time? It's nearby, but on an island. So, she can't return without my permission. It was reassuring to hear that. I expressed my gratitude to Michael's parents and decided to return to my parents' house. Upon visiting Michael's family home, both my father-in-law and Lisa were out, making the large house seem lonely. It's okay. We're relieved without her around. It seemed they were tired of their daily life with Lisa. However, close to my delivery date, a shocking event took place. Michelle! Why are you here? Lisa was banging loudly on my parents' door. At that time, my mother had gone out shopping. I checked all the windows to make sure they were locked. Everything was sealed tight. As long as I didn't go out, I'd be fine. But then, there was a loud crashing noise. Through the living room curtains, I could see a figure. It was Lisa. She was holding a metal baseball bat and stomped her way into the house, shoes on. There you are! I knew you were home, Michelle. I grabbed my phone and made my way to the front door. Lisa seemed to have predicted my move as she quickly closed in on me. I knew I was in danger and tried to rush upstairs. But at that moment, I felt a terrible blow to my back. Lisa had struck me right in the middle of my back with the baseball bat she held. Ouch! But I couldn't just stand there. I choked on the impact, feeling a rising sensation from my stomach, almost like nausea. Still clutching my belly, I began to climb the familiar stairs, trying to move as swiftly as I could. Wait up! Lisa shouted at the top of her lungs. No way I was waiting. My destination was the room on the second floor I'd used before going to college. I've been living on the first floor since I came back home, so I don't usually use it. But in there, I can lock the door from the inside. Lisa, groaning, followed with heavy steps, laboriously making her way up our winding staircase. She paused midway, catching her breath. I took this chance and darted into my room. I locked the door and dragged a table in front of it for extra security. Relief flooded me, and I slumped to the floor. That's when I noticed the carpet was damp. My water broke! I realized this and felt my body shivering uncontrollably. Oh no, not now. On the other side of the door, Lisa had caught up. She was pounding on the door with the bat. Each thud was heavy, a testament to her strength, and random thoughts raced through my head. Then, "Hey! What the hell?" I heard my mom's voice from outside the window. She's back, I thought, relieved. But I couldn't let her in. It's too dangerous. I called my mom on my cell. "Michelle! Are you okay? This shattered window!" "Mom. Call 911. Get an ambulance and the police." "You mean the police, but an ambulance? Don't tell me." "Yes, that's right, my water broke. But I'm trapped upstairs. Hurry, but don't let Lisa see you. She's got a bat." I managed to say this before I fainted from the stress. When I came to, everything seemed to be over. I felt strange and my head was foggy. "Michelle, thank God you're awake." A familiar voice. Michael was by my bed. What happened? Then it hit me. My stomach. "Michelle, when they brought you in, things were looking dire. They had to perform an emergency C-section." "My baby? Where's my baby?" "He's fine. A healthy baby boy. Thank you. We'll go see him together later." I took a deep breath of relief. And... Ouch! "You can't do that. The doctor said you have a pretty bad fracture." I shivered. Was it when Lisa hit me? Did the bat strike my ribs? Thank God it wasn't the baby. I truly felt that from the bottom of my heart. Michael then apologized. "I'm sorry." "Huh? Why are you apologizing?" "That baseball bat Lisa brought over was in my room." Oh, I remembered. It was the bat Michael had once used for the baseball team he had to quit midway. "I shouldn't have left it where she could find it." "It's not your fault. If she hadn't found your bat, she probably would have taken Dad's golf club." That's when it hit me. What happened to Lisa? "Well, she was caught red-handed breaking the windows of your family home." I thought Lisa was supposed to be on a work trip to the island. It seems she overheard a phone conversation between my father and me. About my pregnancy? Yeah. She must have figured out the timing of when she was brought to the island for work and lost her cool. "We'll need to cool things down for a while." I felt relieved after hearing that. The next day after we were discharged from the hospital, my son, Alex, was as lively as ever, and he was now breastfeeding. I was gently stroking Alex's back when my smartphone rang. It was Michelle. I thought about ignoring it, but the call continued longer than I expected. However, after the 40th ring, I decided to answer, "Hello?" "Finally! Why did you take so long? How long did you plan to make me wait?" Another noise overlapped with her voice. "Stop that! Ugh, it's so loud!" "Hey, Lisa. Do you have a baby with you?" What I heard next was indeed the voice of a baby. "That's right. I took your son. But he's so noisy, crying nonstop." I was confused. Why would there be a baby there? "Ugh. I thought I'd take him home and raise him my way, but he's so loud." I quickly reached for the home phone. "Hello, is this Michael's mom?" "Why, what's up? Is Alex okay?" "Yes, but..." "Isn't that Alex crying?" Lisa was still making a racket in the background. It seems my mother-in-law heard the noise. Whispering, I asked, "Do you know where Lisa is right now?" "Huh? She's been quiet since the police handed her over." "She just called, and it sounds like she has a baby with her." My mother-in-law gasped in shock. There were some noises. Probably her checking if Lisa's car was around. I put the home phone near my smartphone. "You checked the hospital to see if your son was there, didn't ya? Tough luck, he's right here with me." Ugh, so darn loud. "Oh, I got an idea." "Lisa, what have you been saying all this time?" With a pleased look as if she had come up with something, I asked her with a sinking feeling. "I'm gonna leave your baby out in the mountains." "But Alex is here with me, breastfeeding." "What? The next moment, a scream echoed from the other end. "My Alex!" I gently poked Alex's cheek. He let out a cheerful laugh. Lisa must have heard that. "Wait, then whose baby do I have here?" "What don't you get? Wasn't your son still in the hospital?" "My son and I have been discharged and are at home." There was a loud thud followed by the sound of a baby crying even louder and Lisa screaming. She must have realized she kidnapped someone else's baby. I grabbed the home phone. "Did you hear that? Something serious has happened." "Yes. I'm gonna call the hospital right now. You stay put." The call ended. What a reliable woman. Indeed, I was not in a position to move right now. Given the constant need for breastfeeding, I couldn't leave my son's side. For the time being, I decided to focus all my energy on soothing my son, who started crying due to the noise coming from the other side of the smartphone. Later, I was informed that Lisa's car was found parked by the seaside road. Lisa was found dazed inside the car. The baby placed in the car seat in the back was safely retrieved. He was mildly dehydrated and was sternly reprimanded by the paramedics. Needless to say, his parents were furious with Lisa. This wasn't just a family squabble like breaking a window. It was a kidnapping involving someone else's child. The parents of the kidnapped baby were mildly dehydrated and were furious, saying, "Our child was almost killed. We won't let this slide." They clearly showed an attitude of not forgiving Lisa tomorrow. My father-in-law, who rushed back in a hurry, reportedly told the police, "There's no handling this at home anymore. I thought I was keeping an eye on things to make sure Michelle and others weren't inconvenienced, but this is the last straw. I'm cutting ties with you for good." Lisa, the one being told this, seemed initially clueless about what he was talking about. Then, the moment she understood, she reportedly let out a loud scream. But why someone else's child? The police gave the answer to the in-laws. Firstly, Lisa had been quiet at the in-laws' house for a while. But it seems that was to plot revenge against me for being detained over the matter of breaking the glass at her family home. She learned about my upcoming discharge from overhearing a conversation between her parents and planned to kidnap my son before that. But Lisa missed the exact discharge date. My release from the hospital had been brought forward. Both my son and I were in good enough health to be discharged, and suddenly, there was a need for our bed. I gladly agreed to the early release. Lisa came to the hospital after I had already been discharged. She apparently sneaked into a patient room where another mother and child with the same last name as ours were staying and took the child when she sensed I wasn't there. Apparently, with her large build, wearing a sling carrying a baby, she just looked like any other patient being discharged. The bassinet was one of the items that my mother-in-law had hurriedly bought in preparation for my baby, including a crib and other things. She quickly sneaked into the house and, while looking for her car keys, spotted it and thought it was just perfect to take. The baby's mother, who happened to be in the bathroom, and the hospital were in an uproar. The situation became clear thanks to a call from my mother-in-law, and both the police and ambulances were dispatched. The police also came to our house, checked the call history on my smartphone, and said they were able to pinpoint Lisa's location. So, as a result, Lisa is gonna be in jail for a while. Deservedly so. She's gonna face a criminal trial, and lawyers keep coming, asking for testimonies that would be in her favor, but the in-laws firmly declined and said they won't support or help her in any way. My smartphone finally went silent. We sighed in relief, thinking that peaceful days are finally upon us. At this rate, the day when Michael will return to take over the family home and we all live happily together seems close. Daddy always buys me candies. I couldn't believe my kind husband, who cares so much for our daughter, would do something like this. At this point, I was still unaware of the true meaning behind his overtime work. My name is Natalie Thompson. I am 36 years old. My husband, Ken, and I have been married for 6 years and we have a 4-year-old daughter. I am a mother, but also a surgeon. I have been busy with my work since we got married. Ken, aware of my busy schedule, said, "Let's work through this together." And so, we got married. Later on, we were able to have a child. I went back to work shortly after our daughter was born. I wanted to watch our daughter grow a little more, but my job was so demanding that I couldn't take much time off. Despite my busy days, I don't think I've neglected my daughter, and I believe I've given her plenty of love. I think Ken is very supportive when it comes to parenting. He makes time to play with our daughter, and even when I'm not around, he can almost perfectly handle bathing her and getting her dressed. Our 4-year-old daughter loves her dad. Ken has his own job and it must be tough for him, but since our daughter was born, he has been very considerate of my busy work schedule. I have some late nights at work. Even when I'm home, I often have to work. Still, Ken always tells me, "Don't overdo it. I'll take care of our daughter." I took comfort in Ken's words. But I didn't know yet. I couldn't believe that my kind husband was doing something like this. Our daughter attends daycare, and I usually drop her off in the morning, while Ken, who has a more flexible schedule, picks her up. Since she has been going to daycare since she was a baby, she has many friends. She even says she wants to go to daycare on her days off. She enjoys it that much. What I looked forward to the most each day was hearing stories about my daughter's day at daycare after I got home from work. She would tell me stories about playing with her friends at daycare, like building sandcastles or racing to the park. And she would always talk about her time with Ken as well. "Today, Daddy and I went shopping for dinner." She always seemed so happy when she talked about it, which made me feel warm inside. I couldn't be more thankful to Ken, who was doing such a great job with our daughter. I had never heard Ken mention having to work overtime before. His company, being relatively large, seemed to encourage employees to leave work on time. So, Ken rarely came home late. But one day, he texted me saying he had to work late and asked if I could pick up our daughter. Fortunately, I was able to arrange my schedule that day and picked her up instead of Ken. Until then, Ken had always been the one to pick her up because of his flexible schedule, so I hadn't heard him mention overtime work before. I thought maybe he had been managing to adjust his schedule all this time, even when it was difficult. At the time, I didn't think much of it. When Ken came home, I asked him, "Have you been adjusting your schedule to pick up our daughter even when you're busy?" After a brief pause, he replied, "It's been a bit busier lately." Ken has a managerial position, so he has a lot of responsibilities. I told him, "If I can arrange my schedule, I'll pick her up, so let me know if you're having a tough time." My husband just said thank you and played with our daughter. After telling him this, he gradually started asking me to pick up our daughter more frequently. I thought it was unavoidable due to work, so I explained the situation to my workplace, arranged time to pick up my daughter, and asked my mother at home to help until I finished work. This went on for 2 months. Eventually, I couldn't take time off every time, so I asked my husband if there was any other way. He then said, "I have a position too, I can't keep saying that. Taking care of the child is a mother's job, right?" I was surprised because he had never said anything like that before. I wondered what had suddenly happened. I thought he might have become harsh due to stress and busyness. However, this incident changed my husband's attitude towards me. Until now, he used to help with household chores and child-rearing when I was busy with work, but he stopped doing anything at all. He became busier and couldn't manage everything. I thought I should do whatever I could. However, there were times when I couldn't handle all the housework. Even when I asked for help, he recently started saying, "It's because you prioritize your work." I understood that. But the fact is, I can't neglect my work when I have patients. He should understand that since he married me, so why suddenly say such a thing? I had one guess. It was that my husband had often tried to talk to me at night. I had been saying I was busy with work or had work left. Admittedly, my husband hasn't been a priority lately. I'm busy, and since our daughter was born, I haven't felt that way. If I have time for my husband, I'd rather rest, to be honest. I hadn't realized that this was the reason I was coming home late. Lately, my husband often said he would be late because he was busy at work. I thought it was unusual after so many years, but I couldn't say anything because I had relied on him too much. However, we have a daughter, so we have no choice but to cooperate. I told my husband that I didn't need him to pick up our daughter every time, but I wanted him to make time somehow. After thinking for a while, he reluctantly agreed. Since then, I haven't heard him say he's working overtime as much. He's been picking up our daughter properly. I felt bad for putting all the burden on my husband, so I told him to adjust within his limits. He just said he understood. However, his attitude towards me remained the same. I wondered why my husband's attitude had changed, but it didn't take long to find out. One day, I was able to finish work earlier than usual. That day, there was no message from my husband saying he would be late due to overtime, so I was a little excited to spend time with my family. My husband usually buys ready-made meals or quickly prepares food. I always rely on my husband, so I decided to cook homemade food after a long time. I wanted to make a lot of their favorite dishes. I was desperately thinking about the menu on my way home. It was time for my daughter and husband to come home, so I finished shopping for dinner and hurried home. Today, I can get home early and listen to my daughter's stories slowly. My daughter, who always wants to help, will probably want to cook together. I was excited. After my daughter went to bed, I thought about having a drink with my husband. I opened the front door with such thoughts. I checked if my daughter and husband had come home. But I felt something was wrong. For some reason, the shoes were arranged differently than usual. I thought my daughter had lined up the shoes I had forgotten to put away. I cautiously looked at the shoes in the entrance again and saw my daughter's and husband's familiar shoes. So far, everything was normal. But there was also a pair of shoes with a design that young girls would like. Why are these shoes at our house? Before I could understand what was happening, I hurried into the house and went to the living room. When I quietly opened the living room door, my daughter was eating snacks and watching TV alone. Welcome back, Mom. You're early today. What's going on? My daughter was watching TV alone as if it were a regular thing. I asked my daughter without understanding the situation. I'm home. I saw Daddy's shoes, but where is Daddy? Daddy is working with someone from his office in the room upstairs, so wait by watching TV. Hearing that, I got goosebumps. From the shoes at the entrance and my daughter's words, I could somehow sense what was happening. No, but it's impossible. Would my husband, who cares about our daughter, do such a thing? I went upstairs, trying not to think too much and holding my breath. And then, I confirmed that there was some noise coming from a room. I hesitated for a moment, but then I forcefully opened the door of that room. My head went blank, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. There, I saw a sight I didn't even want to imagine, my husband and another woman. Hey! Natalie, what are you doing here? It's not what are you doing here, is it? What are you doing in our bedroom? Who is that woman? And what do you mean by leaving our daughter alone in the living room? I couldn't stop talking. Just get dressed quickly and explain. My hand trembling with anger as I closed the door. Leaving our 4-year-old daughter alone in the living room, what was this man thinking? Moreover, bringing a woman into our house and into the bed where our whole family sleeps. After a while, when I opened the door, the two were sitting side by side, dressed. What does this mean? I asked, pretending to be calm. Well, this is... At first, my husband, Ken, tried to make an excuse, but then the woman beside him whispered, "Is that your wife?" And he suddenly said to me, "It's because you're always working and never paying attention to me. This is your own fault." That's right. Poor Ken. Well, it seems like he doesn't see you as a woman anymore, old lady. That's right. Now that you understand, get out quickly. What is he talking about? While thinking that in the back of my mind, I was already running down the stairs before he finished talking. I wanted to retort more, but I was not in the mood due to anger and sadness. I just wanted to get away from there as quickly as possible. Then, while eating snacks and sitting cutely watching TV, I told my daughter, "Let's go out." My daughter asked without hesitation, "Where's Daddy?" "Daddy is busy with work." It was hard to explain to my daughter, and I held back my tears of anger and headed for my parents' house. In the car, I asked my daughter, "Has Daddy ever said he was working with a woman at home after picking you up from daycare?" "Yes. He said it was important work, so I had to watch TV quietly. And don't tell Mommy. If you can keep it a secret, you can eat snacks. Amy and Daddy always bought me lots of snacks." "I'm sorry, Mommy." My daughter called the woman Amy. "Do you know the name of the lady?" My daughter was a quick learner. She remembered the woman's name and told me. I felt guilty and angry at my daughter's innocent words, and the tears I had been holding back came out. My husband, who had bribed a small child with snacks to keep quiet and brought a woman into our home several times while leaving her alone in the room, was unforgivable. And I started thinking about how to get back at those two, and decided to consult someone. When I have a problem, there is always one person I consult first. It was my boss at work. This boss introduced us and knows my husband's company well. He has been a trustworthy person who has listened to my problems sincerely since I started working. I told my boss about what happened and the woman's name. My boss listened seriously but didn't say much, just listened to my story. And then he went back to work. A week later, I was called by my boss. I thought it was about the consultation. My boss had secretly investigated. It turned out that the woman my husband was having an affair with was a student working part-time at my husband's company. I became very sad when a student stole my husband, but the thought of my husband being smitten with that student gave me goosebumps. I was introduced to someone by my boss, whom I had consulted. It turned out to be the hospital director, whom I also knew. I was wondering why the director was introduced to me, when my boss said, "Actually, I was consulted by the director as well. It seems that his daughter is not going to school much, and he's wondering what to do. It's surprising that she is not only skipping school but also having an affair." My boss seemed to be surprised as well. It turned out that the daughter, whom the director had consulted about, was the woman with whom my husband was having an affair. I thought the world was a small place. According to my boss, the woman my husband was having an affair with is a medical student aiming to become a doctor. I wondered why she was working part-time at my husband's company, which is not related to medicine. However, it didn't take long to find out. I decided to lay in wait near my husband's office. I was surprised that I was trying to meet the woman my husband was having an affair with, but I had no intention of backing down. Then, the woman appeared. When she noticed me, she said, "Eh? What? A middle-aged woman laying in wait? Scary. She can say whatever she wants. Today, you are not with my husband, are you?" The woman laughed snidely and said with a composed expression, "I'm not with him every day. But sorry for stealing your high-income husband, old lady." While thinking that I earn more than my husband, I continued, "I heard you are a medical student. Why are you working part-time at my husband's company, which has nothing to do with being a doctor?" The woman, looking shocked, glared at me as if to say, "You've researched that much?" Ken kept saying he wanted me near him. He was persistent, but Ken buys me anything. It's nice to have a high-income boyfriend. The woman seemed to consider my husband as nothing more than a cash cow. I felt a bit sorry for my husband, who didn't know he was thought of in that way, but that didn't matter anymore. If you are aiming to be a doctor, shouldn't you be going to school and studying properly? Why do I have to be told what to do by an old lady like you? Can you stop picking on me just because your husband was stolen? It's my business, isn't it? When I told her that her father was worried about her, the woman's face started to turn pale. "Why are you bringing up my father? Don't say careless things without knowing anything." I made a call to someone on the spot. And within a minute, the director appeared. As soon as the director saw me, he apologized, saying, "I am truly sorry for my daughter." The woman, who didn't understand why her father was there, was flustered. "I heard everything. What are you doing, not going to school and playing with someone else's husband? What's fun about that?" The woman's father, the director, seemed to be a very strict person, and she seemed unable to talk back. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know he was married." She was desperately trying to make excuses even at this point, but the director had heard the entire conversation between us. "Whether he was married or not, what you are doing is pathetic, and there was no excuse that would work." Afterwards, the woman, who couldn't say anything to her father, was taken home by the director. I had planned this day with the director immediately after my boss introduced us. When I told the director about my husband, he held his head in his hands, saying, "I can't believe my daughter is doing such a pathetic thing." And then he said, "I will scold my daughter properly, so please demand compensation or anything you need." I once thought that it would be unreasonable to demand compensation from a student, but considering the director's feelings, I decided to demand it properly. I returned home after a month. It seems that my husband is feeling down, maybe because he lost contact with the woman he was having an affair with. During this month, he did not apologize to me at all, only contacted me about our daughter. He probably thought I would come back eventually and waited carelessly. I have been preparing for divorce this past month. I am also considering taking a significant amount of money from both of them. Of course, I will make my husband pay child support. I placed the business card of my divorce lawyer and a settlement document regarding child support and property division in front of my husband. I remember reading somewhere that it's good to prepare a settlement document to make sure you get paid properly. It said that if you do not get paid, you can take legal action. I have lost trust in my husband due to this incident, and I thought of getting revenge by being thorough. I consulted with my lawyer multiple times and created the settlement document. When my husband saw the business card and settlement document, he quickly said, "I don't want a divorce." He insisted he only met the woman once, but I told him our daughter said she had been coming and going from our house multiple times and had even bribed her with candy. Do you believe what a 4-year-old child says more than me? That's impossible. I trust Mindy more than you. I won't forgive you for belittling Mindy just because she's a child. It seemed my husband was angry that I believed our daughter more than him. No matter what I said, he insisted it was only once, so I presented a recording I secretly made when he met the woman. "You met Amy behind my back and even recorded it? I didn't know you had the courage to do such a thing." He seemed to be belittling me. And he was confident that the woman wouldn't say anything bad about him. However, when he heard the woman referring to him as a cash cow, he was shocked. He was in love with her. Unable to make excuses, my husband bowed his head in silence. I said firmly, "I don't want to waste any more time on you, so sign the settlement document quickly." Reluctantly, he signed the document. Later, I visited my boss who had advised me and reported the situation, expressing my gratitude. My boss told me that when I mentioned the woman's name, he recognized it and immediately understood the situation. Thanks to my boss, I was able to get a divorce. Afterward, the divorce was finalized. I demanded money from both my husband and the woman he had an affair with. I got custody of our daughter. My husband, who loves our daughter despite what he did, begged me to let him see her until the end. But I firmly refused, not wanting my daughter to see a man who had a relationship with another woman while leaving her behind. My husband was disheartened, but he couldn't afford to be down because he had to work hard to pay child support. It seems that the woman was scolded severely by her father after that. Her father found out she was neglecting school and getting involved with men and told her, "Can someone like you handle a job where you are responsible for people's lives? If you are serious, retake the entrance exam." He also told her to drop out and repay the tuition. It seems the woman is working hard to earn money to pay back her father for the tuition and my consolation money. As for me, I am still busy, but I make sure to spend quality time with my daughter, and I feel fulfilled. We don't need the old lady. You can deal with the dead weight. Alicia, my sister-in-law, said with a smug smile. She probably doesn't care about Grandma as long as she gets the house. My brother also grinned, looking at Grandma and me. This isn't a place where Grandma can live her final days happily. That's why I declared. It's okay, I'll be with Grandma. My name is Amy Smith. I turned 50 this year. Currently, I live with my husband. We have 2 kids, but they moved out long ago after becoming adults. There were tough times juggling work and parenting when the kids were little, but looking back, it feels surprisingly short-lived. What fills the emptiness in my heart are my job, my husband, and Grandma. Currently, I work with my husband at a high-end restaurant. I run the place, while my husband, Jake, is the head chef. The reason I'm the owner is that I majored in business management in college and was interested in the restaurant business. At first, I wanted to provide my own dishes, but I quickly gave up. Seems like I didn't have a knack for cooking. Back in college, a posh hotel nearby was hiring kitchen helpers. Luckily, I got the job. But apparently, even as a part-timer, my cooking skills didn't meet professional standards. My knife skills were so bad that they quickly moved me to serving. Even if it was a lowly position, I wanted to gain some experience in the culinary world. It was my first setback. I ran straight to Grandma for comfort. After comforting me for a bit, Grandma looked me in the eyes and said, "Amy, I know you have dreams. But there isn't just one path. Some might be detours, but no road is useless. So, keep your chin up and give it a shot." Encouraged by Grandma's strong words, I replied, "Thanks, Grandma. I'm gonna give it my best shot." Thanks to Grandma's words, I managed to keep going and continued my serving job throughout college. Grandma was always kind and always stood by my side. For someone like me, who lost both parents, she's the most dependable figure in my life. And then I met Jake. Jake was training as a chef at the same posh hotel where I worked part-time. Even though he was in training, he had been working there for about 5 years and was trusted with some parts of the cooking. One day, probably having heard from other staff, Jake found out about my interest in cooking. He said, "If you'd like, I can teach you. I'm still in training, so I can only show you the basics." "Really? Thank you so much," I replied with a big smile. From then on, we started visiting each other's homes and began our cooking lessons. Since we couldn't use the hotel kitchen, we practiced in our own kitchens. As I learned from him, Jake and I got closer and eventually started dating. After 3 years of dating, we got married. We happily became a married couple. Even after our marriage, Jake continued his training at the high-end hotel. I took a job at a startup that managed multiple restaurants to learn about business management. There, I learned the ropes of running a business. It was a series of challenges, far more intricate than my college classes. I made mistakes countless times and got reprimanded by my bosses. However, as I continued to fail, I gradually accumulated successful experiences. In the end, using the startup company's program, I opened an upscale restaurant. Even though I was an employee, I successfully realized my dream of managing a restaurant. Of course, I chose Jake as the head chef. Jake had just finished his training, so he decided to leave his job at the luxury hotel without any regrets. And that's how Jake and I combined our strengths to run an upscale restaurant. Work is going smoothly, but my personal life has been put on the back burner. I'm so busy that the time I can spend with my grandmother has drastically decreased since my student days. For someone like me, my dependable grandmother now lives with my brother and his wife. My brother, Bob, who is 3 years older than me. However, he's a bit quirky. When I told him about becoming an entrepreneur using the startup company's program, he completely shot down the idea, saying, "Why are you doing something so high risk? Having a regular job is the most stable. Besides, being a salaried manager doesn't pay much and it's not even worth it." "Come on, Bob, don't you think that's a bit harsh?" "Sure, I'm using the company's program." I protested against Bob's blunt words. But Bob seemed unwilling to change his stance and continued to argue. Listen, Amy. Stability is the key in this world. Yet, you live so recklessly. Your husband's the same, right? Both of you managing a business together is too reckless. If the restaurant fails, you both go down. What? I was taken aback. Just remember, if things go south and you end up in debt, don't come running to me. I'm only looking out for Alicia. I was really shocked by this outburst. In my case, I have the support of my employer, so I'm not incurring any personal debt. But before I could retaliate, my sister-in-law, Alicia, chimed in. You and your husband really live on the edge, don't you, Amy? But if things go bad, please don't rely on us. Hearing this, I resolved never to ask them for help, no matter how tough things got. The reason my grandmother ended up in the care of this couple was due to their unilateral decision and high-handedness. One day, when I visited my grandmother's house where she lived alone, Alicia answered the doorbell and blurted out, "Why are you here, Amy?" Surprised to see Alicia there, I asked, "Why are you here, Alicia?" "This is my grandmother's house." Realizing the situation, Alicia replied, "I've been living here since the other day to take care of Bob's grandmother. Got a problem with that? You're probably too busy with your restaurant anyway, right?" It was true, I had just started my upscale restaurant and was very busy. I couldn't always be by my grandmother's side. If something happened when Jake and I weren't there, it would be a disaster. On the other hand, Alicia was a housewife and could be with my grandmother during the day. Confidently, she said, "I can be with her." All I could reply was, "Please take care of her." After that, I often visited my grandmother's house. Every time I did, Alicia would sarcastically say, "Again? You need to let go of your grandmother." Still, I was worried about my grandmother. But this was her house. However, getting into an argument with Alicia, who was living with my grandmother, wasn't a good idea. So, I would say, "Sorry, I just wanted to see her for a bit," and kept visiting my grandmother. Every time I visited, my grandmother seemed happy to see me. But over time, she seemed to be losing her energy, and I was worried. Then, one day, as usual, I found her collapsed at the entrance. "Grandma, what happened?" "Hey, stay with me," I shouted at my grandmother, but there was no response. In a panic, I called an ambulance and rushed to the hospital with my unconscious grandmother. "She has only 6 months left?" The doctor's prognosis was devastating. My beloved grandmother was seriously ill. Apparently, the hospital she was brought to was where her primary doctor practiced. According to the doctor, there was nothing more the hospital could do. They could only provide palliative care, and since my grandmother wished to be treated at home, they respected that decision. While I was hearing this devastating news from the doctor, a nurse informed me that my grandmother had woken up. "Grandma!" As I entered the hospital room, my grandmother looked in my direction. "Amy, I'm so sorry. I should have told you earlier," Grandma murmured weakly. My eyes began to blur with tears. "Is it true? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Do Alicia and Bob know?" Tears streaming down my face, I asked her, and she slowly shook her head in response. "No one knows. I was planning to just quietly fade away all by myself." Seeing Grandma like this saddened me deeply. At the same time, I felt that something needed to be done. "Let's tell Alicia and Bob about it." Before I knew it, I had made this strong suggestion to her. Grandma seemed taken aback by my sudden proposal. Surely, with a situation as dire as this, even those troublemakers, my brother and his wife, would change their attitudes. At least, that's what I believed. 3 days later, Grandma was discharged from the hospital. But it wasn't a positive kind of discharge. There's simply nothing more the hospital could do for her. Supporting her, I took Grandma back to her house. When we entered her house, which she handed me the keys to, both Bob and Alicia were there, probably because it was Sunday. Where have you been all this time? Anyway, it's been kind of nice without the old lady around. Alicia was talking with laughter. Bob grinned and agreed, saying, Indeed, it's relaxing not having that nagging old lady around. Our grandma is visibly in a rough shape. Yet, I can't believe they would make such an inappropriate joke in front of her. I got so angry that I snapped back at them. Both of you, cut it out. Grandma is sick and has only 6 months to live. She can barely stand now. How can you say such things? When I shouted, they both seemed taken aback for a moment. But soon Bob, with a cynical laugh, muttered, You're kidding, right? Alicia didn't seem to believe it either. She smirked and looked at me. So, I told them with a stern face. Sadly, it's true. If you think it's a lie, why don't you ask Grandma's primary physician? Grandma, with her weak voice, also added, I really do have only 6 months. I imagine I won't be able to do many things soon. Upon hearing this, Alicia's face twisted. What? So, I have to take care of her? I don't want to deal with that. I just came to this house to save on rent. I absolutely don't want to care for her. Old lady, just leave now. Alicia waved her hand, shooing Grandma away. Tears formed in Grandma's eyes. We don't need you, old lady. Amy will take care of you, Alicia said smugly. Probably, as long as she gets the house, she doesn't care about Grandma. Bob was also smirking as he watched me and Grandma. He seemed to have no feelings for our grandma. She won't be happy in this place. So, I declared, It's okay, Grandma. I'll be by your side. I quickly countered, This is Grandma's house. And she wishes to spend her last moments here. However, Alicia stood her ground. Sorry, Amy. I've always known that Bob and Alicia have bad attitudes, but I never thought it would come to this. Grandma apologized repeatedly. She seemed on the verge of tears, her shoulders trembling. Seeing her like that hurt me. But Alicia looked at us with pure disdain. Can you leave now? You're in the way. Also, don't come to us for help later, even if you regret it. We won't help you, not even with a cent. She sighed deeply, looking very annoyed. Really? I definitely won't be taking care of Grandma. Don't expect us to look after her, Bob said, grimacing. It's Alicia and Bob who have imposed themselves on Grandma's home and been a burden. Yet, now that they know about her limited time left, they want to throw her out. I've come to truly despise Bob and Alicia. So, I responded for the last time. I won't have anything to do with Bob or Alicia anymore. I'm gonna cut ties with you as family. If you regret it later, that's on you. It seemed Grandma had also been bottling up her feelings about them, as she whispered, I won't see you two ever again. Goodbye. If we cut ties, it'll be easier when you end up in a lot of debt, Bob said with a chuckle. Exactly, Alicia added. If Amy ends up drowning in debt, it has nothing to do with us since we've cut ties. So, good luck with taking care of the frail old lady and dealing with your debt. Ignoring Alicia's sarcastic wave, Grandma and I left the house. I brought Grandma to my home. As she stepped out of the taxi, she remarked, What a lovely house. In fact, our house is more than twice the size of Grandma's. Thanks to the company's policy, Jake and I, who run an upscale restaurant, receive not only a regular salary but also a special bonus. We get a cashback from the restaurant's profits. It's a unique system of our company. This system, which is like running an independent business, aims to motivate employees. Indeed, thanks to this policy, Jake and I receive a good income from the company with low risk. Our take-home pay is much higher than Bob's, who's just a regular worker. As I thought about that, the front door opened. Hello. Jake greeted me with a smile. I had informed Jake via email beforehand, and he was waiting at home to welcome our grandmother. Jake has been so busy with work that he hasn't had the chance to visit, so today is a long-awaited reunion with our grandmother. Our grandmother looks extremely happy to see Jake. He quickly ushered her into the living room and served some tea. Sipping her tea, grandmother seemed to relax a bit. For the past 6 months, I feel like I can finally live happily. I felt so out of place in that house. Grandmother muttered quietly. According to her, Alicia and her family had been neglecting grandmother all along. They wouldn't even cook her portion of the meals, and sometimes Alicia even took grandma's pension as part of the household expenses. That's awful, I blurted out. Jake looked upset as well. After a moment of heavy silence, Jake, with determination, stood up and said, I'm gonna do something about this. We should give them a taste of their own medicine. I can't stand being pushed around like this. I'd regret not standing up for grandmother. I got up as well and said, We'll make sure they regret it. And so, we took a stand. A few days after we took action, my phone was flooded with calls from Bob's number. Even when ignored, the calls kept coming. I knew this would happen, I murmured. After letting it ring for quite some time, I finally answered. Yes? Finally! What the hell did you do? As soon as I answered, Alicia, sounding frantic, began questioning me. I figured she was using Bob's phone. What are you talking about? I have no idea. I knew exactly what she was getting at, but I played dumb. Alicia, losing patience, pressed on. That's about Grandma's house. Suddenly, a real estate agent is demanding we vacate. Did you have something to do with this? It's our house now, mind your own business. Alicia sounded cornered and irritated. Ignoring her outburst, I calmly responded. Well, Grandma just sold her house. What's the problem? Just because Alicia and her family lived there, they assumed ownership, but the house was still in grandmother's name. I don't get why they felt entitled to it. Alicia, sounding even more flustered, shot back. Why did she sell it? We're living there. Is this some sort of revenge? Just because you're struggling doesn't mean you have to be envious. She didn't seem to believe the house had been sold. This was going nowhere. So I decided to lay out the facts for Alicia. It's true. The sale is already finalized. The property now belongs to the realtor. If you continue to stay there, it'll be trespassing. Alicia sounded completely lost for words. Turns out, after Jake and I decided to act, he went to a real estate agency with grandmother's power of attorney. They quickly moved through the selling process. By the way, when we explained the situation to Grandma, she was completely on board and signed the papers right away. I definitely don't want to hand the house over to Bob and his family, Grandmother had said, her face turning red with anger, which showed just how upset she was. As I explained the situation, Alicia began to panic on the other end. So suddenly? Where are we supposed to live now? We even gave up our previous apartment. And with that, she broke down over the phone. Actually, according to what my grandma told me, Alicia, despite being a stay-at-home mom, was quite the big spender. She'd casually buy designer handbags and never missed her monthly spa treatments. Bob is just an office worker and definitely not earning a high salary. Because of that, it seemed like Alicia and him were struggling to make ends meet. Alicia had pre-existing debts, and their finances were a real mess. Under normal circumstances, that would be grounds for divorce, but Bob is too smitten with Alicia. Probably because she's a beauty. So, on Bob's suggestion, to save on rent, they both moved into my grandmother's house. But to be honest, I couldn't care less about their situation. I don't know why you came to me. Why don't you just stay in a motel or something until you find a new place? Oh wait, you're broke, right? I said sarcastically to Alicia. She seemed to think I had no idea about their financial struggles. Suddenly she looked panicked and whispered, How did you know? Bob, perhaps not wanting this to be known, just kept quiet. Then, my grandmother chimed in. I told her. She continued. Amy and Jake's home is really comfortable. It's spacious and clean, with all the latest appliances. It's worlds apart from where you lived before. And she chuckled. Bob immediately bit back. What the hell? How come you guys have money? Weren't you drowning in debt? His pride seemed hurt, and he was shouting in disbelief. I kindly informed him. Aside from our salaries, we also get a percentage of the profits. So, I believe we earn significantly more than you. Plus, we're a two-income household. We probably make double what you do, easy. No way. Bob seemed stunned on the other end of the line. You always said being a salaried worker was the right path. Turns out, we're living a much wealthier life than you. You really had tunnel vision, didn't you? I couldn't help but laugh. I could hear Bob growling over the phone. Upon realizing our affluence, Alicia started to butter me up. Then can we stay at your place, Amy? If your house is that big, there should be room for us, right? What a ridiculous proposal. I promptly declined. Absolutely not. Didn't you specifically ask us not to rely on you? We've cut ties with you guys, so don't come crawling back now. Find your own way. With that, I hung up. They've tried calling multiple times since, but I just ignore them. I never want to have anything to do with people like Bob and Alicia again. I hope they realize and regret their actions. Eventually, I heard they were caught shoplifting. The police contacted me, and I got to know about it. Apparently, Alicia's debt had snowballed to a point where Bob's salary alone couldn't cover it. Alicia even seemed to be taking her grandmother's pension. Debt collectors started showing up at Bob's workplace, which led to his debts being exposed and him getting fired. With no income, repaying their debts became even harder. Bob and Alicia seemed to have been struggling even for daily meals. As a result, they apparently shoplifted sandwiches and bread from a convenience store, and the store's staff reported them, leading to their arrest. Seems they've hit rock bottom. According to the police, they wanted me as their guarantor. I messed up. I'm sorry, just look out for us, Bob pleaded. But it's too little too late. Even Alicia, who usually had no regrets, seemed genuinely remorseful. Please help us. I'll apologize for everything. Just give us a hand. I heard Alicia has been pleading this way through the police. But this whole mess started because of Alicia's reckless spending. Bob being oblivious was also a problem. They brought this upon themselves. And after what they did to my dear grandmother, I can never forgive them. They can keep struggling for all I care. 3 months have passed since then. My grandmother is still alive and well. Which brings me so much joy. I took a caregiving leave and have been staying by her side. There's a real advantage to having a flexible job. Even though she has her tough moments, on her good days, we can walk around the garden together. These times are the most enjoyable and therapeutic for me. Grandma, your birthday's coming up. Is there anything you'd like to eat? I asked her. She responded, maybe a cake baked by you, Amy. Even now, she tries to make me feel better about my subpar cooking skills, and it really tugs at my heartstrings. I still want to be with my grandma, and I feel I haven't done enough for her. Every day, I want to make even just a little more memories with her. And I plan to be by her side for as long as she's with us. I live with my son, so you need to leave. Suddenly, my mother-in-law I'm living with threw those cold words at me. I thought I have always been good to my mother-in-law. I've always tried to make sure she didn't have any inconveniences, but it seems my mother-in-law never noticed. There have been times when my mother-in-law treated me poorly, and I have grown resentful of her. Finally, I was like, I'll gladly leave. I haven't intended to say that, but I thought that was probably how I truly felt. My husband is away on a business trip. The only one who'd be in trouble if I left would be my mother-in-law. The luxurious life she's been enjoying in the city is because of me. Had my mother-in-law forgotten that? With these thoughts, I've decided to leave the house. My name is Catherine. I'll be turning 38 this year. My husband and I have been married for 10 years, and we both work. We once considered having children, but the doctor told me it would be difficult for me to conceive. I was told natural conception was nearly impossible, and we considered fertility treatments. However, after many discussions, my husband and I decided not to have children and to enjoy our lives together. Then, my father-in-law got sick and passed away. My mother-in-law had bad knees and living alone in the family home was tough. We thought about hiring a caregiver, but for safety reasons, it seemed best if she lived with us. We were planning to build a house at that time, so we designed it with a room for my mother-in-law in mind. For her convenience, given my mother-in-law's bad knees, we installed a small bathroom, kitchen, and toilet on the first floor. On the second floor, we have our own bathroom and kitchen, thinking my mother-in-law would be comfortable. Though it went over our budget, we felt it was the best decision considering my mother-in-law comfort. It showed our consideration and kindness. But it seemed my mother-in-law didn't see it that way. I could tell from my mother-in-law's behavior since she started living with us. I never had a bad impression of her before, but recently she's become more aggressive toward me. Moreover, my mother-in-law always becomes more aggressive when my husband's not at home. My husband is in sales, and recently he's been traveling abroad more often. While he used to have day trips frequently, it's different with overseas trips. He often stays away for about a week per trip. That very day, my husband mentioned he'd be on an international business trip for about a week. After sending my husband off early in the morning, I began getting ready for work. Suddenly, I heard my mother-in-law's loud voice from downstairs. "Hey! Come down here right now!" Wondering what the fuss was about, I quickly headed to the first floor, but everything looked normal. My mother-in-law was just sitting in the living room, watching TV. I had assumed there was some sort of emergency. Then she was like, "Why are you just standing there? Hurry up and make my breakfast." I had never prepared breakfast for my mother-in-law before, as my husband and I both have full-time jobs and she always made her own. I wondered what had changed. Maybe she wasn't feeling well? I suggested she might need to see a doctor, but she was like, "I'm perfectly fine. Can't you see? Shouldn't my son's wife take care of me? I've heard other households serve a 3-course breakfast every morning." Turns out, the family she was referring to lives together just like us, but the wife is a homemaker. So, she prepares meals 3 times a day. I tried to explain that my husband and I both work, so it's impossible for me to cook in the mornings or midday, but my mother-in-law just turned the TV volume up in frustration. I figured she didn't want to hear what I had to say, so I decided not to say anything more. That day, after finishing work and returning home, I found my mother-in-law waiting for dinner. I made lasagna that my mother-in-law loves, but she was like, "What's this? It's way too salty," and threw all the food I prepared into the trash. After that incident, my mother-in-law became very domineering, constantly picking on me and nitpicking everything I did. When things got unbearable, I confided in a friend who suggested it might be bullying by mother-in-law. Upon researching online, I found numerous similar stories from other my mother-in-laws. As my mother-in-law's behavior continued to worsen, I decided to have a heart-to-heart conversation with her. I took a day off from work and approached her during the day. I was like, "Hey, why have you suddenly started acting so hostile? We've always lived in harmony. If I've done something wrong, let me know. But if you don't talk to me, I won't know how to make things right." However, she didn't seem interested in listening. When I patiently faced my mother-in-law, she eventually started to speak. Apparently, she had become envious after hearing about a family she'd talked about some time ago. In that family, there are 2 kids, a daughter and a son, and the couple lives with the husband's parents. Their home is more spacious than ours, and she's envious because they have coffee with many guests. She mentioned that she wished to spend her retirement in such a manner. Our home isn't necessarily small in our neighborhood, it's actually considered quite large. We have a backyard big enough for barbecue parties, and I told her we could host home parties without any issues. But she felt inferior and believed she couldn't compete, hence not inviting anyone over. Our conversation didn't conclude with any resolution. However, a few days later, an incident occurred. As I was leaving for work, a lady from across the street was staring at me. Moreover, I noticed people whispering and glancing my way elsewhere. Wondering if there was something odd about my attire or makeup, I checked but found nothing amiss. I discovered the reason for the whispers that evening. On my way home from work, one of the neighbors approached me and said, "Hey, I've heard some rumors, violence ain't right." Violence? I was taken aback. Digging deeper, the rumor was that I had become violent with my mother-in-law. It was said that the confrontation took place on the day we had that discussion and that I even told her to leave if she continued with her lavish lifestyle. I have no memory of doing such a thing and had no intentions of ever doing so. After explaining, the lady thought for a moment and was like, "If that's true, it's really not good." The whole neighborhood's buzzing with this story. I've heard that she's been approaching others, wanting to discuss it and sharing stories of your alleged violence. For a while, I was labeled in the neighborhood as the violent wife. I managed to bear it until about 5 days after my husband left on a business trip. Finally reaching my breaking point. I felt I needed to talk to my husband first, but I couldn't muster the courage to bother him with this during his busy trip. So, I decided to first communicate my feelings to my mother-in-law. "I've noticed you seem to have taken a disliking to me this past week. You're my husband's mother, and I wanted us to live comfortably together. No matter how hard I try, it seems I can't change how you feel. Perhaps it would be best if we consider living separately." My mother-in-law looked taken aback by my suggestion for a moment, but then she was like, "I agree. I never really liked you from the start. Living in this fancy house on my son's dime and acting as if you've done it all. A woman who doesn't even have kids and only works has little value in my eyes," and scoffed. At that point, I wondered what my mother-in-law was misunderstanding. Because, you see, I bought this house. From the down payment of the mortgage, everything's been on me. I had explained it when we built the house, but I wonder if my mother-in-law has forgotten. Moreover, I'm the one covering the living expenses. My mother-in-law gets an allowance from my husband and spends it carelessly, but that's also coming out of my salary. Even though my husband is working hard, he's not making as much as expected, and his income is lower compared to mine. So, the agreement was that we'd cover our living expenses from my income and save whatever my husband made, since we don't have kids and for our future. Before we moved in together, my husband had explained this to her, and he had warned her not to be wasteful. Ever since my husband left on his business trip, my mother-in-law has been watching TV infomercial every day and making phone calls. She probably ordered something. As I was thinking about all this, she started saying things like, she was like, "I'm gonna live here with my son. You should leave. I'll discuss the rest with my son. If my son wants, you might even consider a divorce. So, be prepared for that." At this point, I realized it's useless to argue. Once I gave up, I was like, "I'll gladly leave," quickly packed my largest suitcase, and decided to leave the house with all I could carry. Before leaving, I glanced at my mother-in-law, and she was smirking at me. She laughed aloud and was like, "Oh, leaving so soon? That's not too bad of you, but maybe you could be a bit more charming?" Honestly, I don't remember doing anything to upset my mother-in-law this much. Whenever my mother-in-law asked for a ride, I would provide one. I tried my best to spend time with her, so she wouldn't feel lonely. We haven't given her the joy of grandkids, and I work. However, that's the life choice we made as a couple, and my mother-in-law has no right to dictate that. As anger surged within me, I thought my mother-in-law'd be the one regretting this in the end. With that thought, I left the house with my heavy luggage. When told to leave, I wondered where I'd go. My childhood home is a plane ride away, and I couldn't abandon my job. Also, I didn't want to worry my parents. The first place that came to mind was my office. I run my own business, a small cafe. I employ 2 students as part-time, but primarily I manage it on my own. The cafe is in a 1-story house, with the extra space used as an office and storage. Though it's a small house, there's enough space for someone to live. I usually drove from home to the office, but living at the office would cut down the commute. Now, I won't need to cook for my mother-in-law anymore, which means more time for work. As someone passionate about my job, I got excited thinking about the extra working hours while setting up a living space in the office. I cleared out the piles of cardboard boxes and decided to sleep on the blanket I had laid out for napping. I also arranged a table and chairs to make work easier. By evening, 2 student part-timers came in for their shifts. They were surprised to see the office looking different, but once I explained the situation, they readily understood. They were even like, "Let us know if you need anything. We'll help out wherever we can." At that moment, I felt grateful for hiring them. They're such kind-hearted individuals, and they've received excellent feedback from our customers. I've been checking the reviews for our cafe daily, and besides the ambience and the quality of food, many patrons praise the service provided by the part-timers. I had been thinking about raising their pay when I received a call from my husband, who was supposed to be on a business trip. I could only check the message around 9 p.m. My husband mentioned he got home earlier than expected. However, upon arriving, he noticed a lot of my belongings were missing. He confronted my mother-in-law. But my mother-in-law wouldn't spill the beans about my whereabouts. After pressing her for about an hour, she finally explained. My husband then realized I had left due to issues with my mother-in-law and quickly tried to contact me. There were several missed calls, but considering my husband didn't show up at my workplace, I appreciated his understanding of my situation. Feeling guilty about making him worry, I called him back. Without delay, my husband answered, asking what had happened. I was hesitant about whether to be honest about everything, but my husband's persistence made me spill the truth. I briefly explained what my mother-in-law had done to me, and I could tell from my husband's voice that he was furious. He wanted to talk as soon as I finished work. After locking up the cafe and office, I headed home. I had never seen my husband this mad before. Thus, the thought of meeting my husband in this state was intimidating. I reached home around 10 p.m. and noticed that only the lights on the first floor were on. My husband and my mother-in-law must be in the living room. When I tried to unlock the door, my key wouldn't fit. I knocked at the door, and my husband came out to unlock the door. As I entered the living room, there sat my mother-in-law with a sulky expression. Apparently, after I left, she had changed the locks without telling anyone. My husband hadn't noticed earlier since the door was unlocked when he got back from his trip. My husband immediately wanted to hear the whole story from me, so I told him about the incidents over the past week. I explained how my mother-in-law suddenly became overbearing, wouldn't listen during our talks, and went as far as spreading lies about me to the neighbors. Every time I pointed this out, she would accuse me of lying. However, when my husband insisted on hearing everything, she just went silent. After I finished speaking, it was my mother-in-law's turn. My mother-in-law claimed I was violent towards her and wouldn't stop, even when she asked me to. She mentioned she had talked with neighbors, but the harassment from me only seemed to increase. She even began to say that if the neighbors were asked, they would know all about my doings. I wondered what made my mother-in-law so confident to make such outrageous claims. The conversation seemed to be going in circles, and there was no clear conclusion. So, I decided to show something to my husband. I had been collecting video and audio footage. With just a few taps on my smartphone, I could record instantly, and over the past week, I had recorded every time my mother-in-law made snide remarks. Whenever I had the chance, I would prop up my phone to capture my mother-in-law harassing me on video. The footage showed my mother-in-law yelling at me to make dinner and even calling me defective for not having children. Seeing this, my husband was furious, his face turning bright red. On the contrary, my mother-in-law looked pale as if she had seen a ghost. In a desperate attempt to save face, she was like, "This isn't right, Catherine. It's just a misunderstanding. It seems like I'm the bad one, but that's because you cut out the parts where you were being mean. In reality, you've done much worse to me." But my husband, who had experience with video editing, wasn't convinced. If the video had been edited unnaturally, he would have noticed right away. It seemed like my husband completely trusted me. Just as I hoped, he began considering living separately from my mother-in-law. Despite my mother-in-law's vehement objections, my husband seemed firm in his decision. For the time being, I decided to stay at an office. During this period, we discussed whether to live separately and how to go about it if we decided to. Eventually, a conclusion was reached. We were going to send my mother-in-law to a nursing home. We had been against this idea before we moved in together. It seemed like a secure environment where she'd be looked after 24/7. However, my mother-in-law had always said she didn't want to go into a facility. I thought that if she did, it would be incredibly stressful for her. But my husband revealed he had been considering this option for a while. With my mother-in-law's bad knee and both of us working, we just couldn't give her the attention she needed. He believed that the only way to ensure her safety was for her to be in a facility. However, my mother-in-law really pleaded not to be put in a facility, but my husband didn't budge. My husband isn't someone who shows it much, but he really adores me. I started dating him due to his relentless pursuit, and from the time we began our relationship to our marriage, things moved incredibly fast. After getting married, my husband was always helpful around the house and always seemed to put me first. So, I kind of saw it coming when he took my side over my mother-in-law's. My mother-in-law apparently hadn't noticed and assumed my husband would be on her side. But when she was told my mother-in-law'd be placed in a facility, she quickly apologized to me. However, my husband was still upset and didn't listen to anything my mother-in-law said. During all this, I was focusing on running my cafe. Initially open from lunchtime, I began opening it for breakfast and started serving alcohol in the evenings. To my surprise, the number of customers nearly doubled. I was so shocked by the huge response that I inadvertently shared the news with my mother-in-law. I was like, "Thanks to you kicking me out, the cafe is doing better than ever. Thanks for giving me this opportunity," but it seemed to come off as sarcasm to my mother-in-law. I'll never forget the look on my mother-in-law's face when I told her about the cafe's success. Her lips were tight and her eyes weren't smiling. In the end, we had my mother-in-law stay at the closest senior facility. Although the cost was higher compared to other places, it was known for its excellent services. Despite the past tensions, I never wished any ill on my mother-in-law. I'm actually thankful for her raising my husband to be the man he is. So when it came to choosing a facility for her, I wanted to find the best possible place. Being somewhat forced into the facility, I heard my mother-in-law was causing a lot of trouble there. Whenever I visited, I was told she had issues with other residents. The reasons for these disputes were minor things, like making eye contact or speaking too loudly. She often clashed with other residents, but fortunately, it never reached a point where they'd kick her out. They ended up isolating her from the others. The staff kept me updated about my mother-in-law's situation. Initially, my mother-in-law was quite spirited, but about 6 months into her stay, I was told she seemed to lose her energy. She probably felt lonely without talking to others. Recently, with the help of the staff, I received a report that she's now able to converse well with other residents. However, it seems my mother-in-law's nature hasn't changed, and due to her bad attitude, she was evicted from the facility. Although she moved to another facility, she ended up isolated and her loneliness seemed to intensify, possibly leading to dementia. It's a bit sad that she had to be separated from her son, my husband. Still, if it ensures everyone's peace, it might be for the best. Now, I live in Europe with my husband. My husband, who had been traveling abroad more frequently for work, recently said he wouldn't be able to return home for about a month. Then, he suggested he'd like to take me abroad with him. I run a cafe and thought I couldn't possibly leave, but luckily 2 of my student workers were graduating, so I decided to close the cafe and follow my husband. I dreamed of running a restaurant abroad and set off for Europe. At first, the language barrier was tough, and I mostly stayed home. But after making friends in the neighborhood, my perspective changed. A friend got me a job at the local grocery store, and gradually, I was able to communicate better. Eventually, I decided to open a small cafe in a corner of a town. We had a house back in Oregon which was still being mortgaged. We contemplated whether to sell it or not, but due to some false rumors in the neighborhood, we sold it to fund the new cafe. Thanks to the many acquaintances I'd made, a lot of people visited on the opening day. It was also promoted on social media as a homey cafe run by an American, and some customers even came all the way from the US. The reason I started the cafe was that I managed to get permanent residency in Europe. The reason my husband was traveling more was that he was getting more work opportunities abroad than in the US. My husband's company proposed relocating him to their branch in Europe, so we just ended up settling there. He eventually quit that job, but in his new job, he seems to be really shining. And is now earning about the same as I am. When we were like, we've settled down here in Europe, and with both of us, it's hard to figure out where to use our money. To our surprise, we found out we were expecting. We were told natural conception would be difficult, but it feels like a gift from above. Raising a child will be challenging, but I believe my husband and I will manage. We can't wait to meet our baby, even though the due date is a way off. The town I live in is filled with friendly folks, and when I shared the news of my pregnancy, everyone was genuinely thrilled for me. I believe that in this environment, our child will surely have a